ladies and gentlemen, yes, please bring out your animal noises, or indeed put your hands together for Meg, for Sofia, and for Taiye. Thank you very much. It is a glorious day, and on that particular note, please everybody keep hydrated. We have a water station. When you take a mug, write your name on it. That way you can keep it for the day. So we're all doing our little bit on that front, and I know that we have some snacks available too. Yeah, help us keep energized for the day, because it's a long one and it's a hot one. But it's very definitely a beautiful one, and made it all the more so for your presence. So thank you very much for that. Yes, we are talking about sustainable inclusivity. I was just going to touch very briefly on a little story about how I managed to get myself included in the sustainability conversation. And it kind of started from a very young age, and it was enabled, and I'm going to hark back to River's beautiful introduction and reminder today that we are here, but on our shoulders and as our wings were our ancestors. So my journey into sustainability really stemmed, I'm going to start from the fact that I come from a long line of animal lovers, and that was evident to me through literally portraiture.
We're good.
And then my late father was somebody who brought the natural world and my love and care for it into my life from a very young age. And also through knowledge shared within and amongst my sisters as well. And it helped me to find a voice. Then when I met my husband, who has a business called Extreme International, which lends itself to why we're here today, and it's very much in thanks to him and his team who allowed Extreme to become the brand behind the Extreme Hangout. I still felt like I needed to wiggle my way into the sustainability world. I did not have a formal education beyond finishing school. And when I say I finished school, I kind of scraped through it a little bit. I'm not sure I came away with many accolades or awards. In fact, I'm quite sure I didn't. And I cared deeply about the environment, but I didn't know how I would gonna find my way into that to try and help to make a difference. And so I've really had to kind of wiggle into it, and I kind of wiggled into it through Alistair and the team at Extreme allowing me to set up this event. And that is how I found my way into it. And there are going to be all different types of avenues in, and it's really important. And we're going to hear from the ladies here today as to how all of us, as women, as well, finding our voices, as people from, young people in particular, and hey ho to the young people, you guys have done an amazing job about bringing your voices up to the forefront, and we're definitely going to celebrate that with Sofia here in particular. But Taiye, if I may come to you first of all, and I'm going to sit myself down now, and I am going to start with a question for you, which is really, it's about language. So much of this is about language. And I'm just going to have one little last story, which was an op-ed that was published by Razan Al-Mubarak last week. And she said something which kind of made my brain just sort of do backflips. She said that in the Arabic language, there is no way to describe nature-based solutions. So, immediately, as an English speaker, my brain just sort of boggled completely, because I'm like, this is language, and Arabic language, why can't we simply translate that? But, so just to you, what does sustainable inclusivity mean? And how would you define it? Not working? We might need another mic. Do we have another handheld, please? We do. This is great news. Thank you.
Oh, no, it's working.
No, it's working.
Okay, we have a backup.
It's a good question, because I think we use this language
as if everybody knows what it means, or as if everybody means the same thing by the same words, but it's rarely the case that we take the time to ensure that the language has a shared meaning amongst all its users. So sustainability, I like the definition that sustainability is the intersection between three E's: equity, environment, and economy. And I think that's been sort of the general understanding since the term came into popularity, wherever one sort of starts running the clock, 72, 92, 30, 50 years ago. But the fact that we've needed to further clarify that there should be such a thing as inclusive sustainability suggests that the first E, the equity piece, kind of fell away as the sustainability agenda was pursued. And I think that's regrettable because it's difficult to imagine any form of sustainability, whether we're talking about sustainable architecture, sustainable fashion, sustainable development, without asking or attending to how the economic equity piece fits in. So I was just in Ghana. My family is from Ghana and Nigeria, which are commonly called developing countries, although I have some thoughts about that too. And I was just observing how sustainability is practiced in that sort of space. So you have an upper class that uses solar panel energy, and you have a working class, a lower class that is still running diesel generators. You've got an upper class that tries very hard to feed its family with organic and sustainably produced food, and you have a working class that can only afford cheap processed produce. You have an upper class that uses LED bulbs and a working class that is still lighting its environments with incandescent bulbs. So there's this huge economic gulf that separates what is possible in terms of sustainability for one group of people and another, which makes me wonder, perhaps a bit pessimistically, but realistically, it would seem, whether we have used the phrase inclusive sustainability without asking ourselves what it actually requires.
100%. Now, guys, you have to let me apologize to you because I'm a totally hopeless moderator. And I didn't actually allow the ladies to introduce themselves. So we're just going to step back really quickly. Girls, could you just give me just a couple of minutes on who you all are so that the audience actually feel like they know you, as opposed to me sort of sitting here assuming, oh, hopeless. Please.
You're not hopeless
Go
at
ahead.
all. I think it's much more interesting what we have to say about sustainability than what we have to say about ourselves. So I think we agree with you. But I'm Taiye. I am a writer and storyteller, to use that lovely word from the last panel, whose interest in sustainability mostly derives from my interest in the developing world. So sustainable development is a concern, just as you said, a personal and passionate interest of mine.
Thank you.
Can
Sofia.
you hear me okay? Oh, I think you can. Hi, everybody. And first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Sofia Barbeiro. I'm Portuguese, coming from a city called Leiria, so still center of Portugal. And I'm a project manager professionally, but on the side, and almost as a second job, I've been exploring for the past few years the opportunities that are available for young people to take the space in different realms within sustainability, more the youth advocacy, as it's called, side. And yeah, so this is usually what I bring to the table, exploring what opportunities are out there and whether those opportunities are reaching all young people or not. And I think we'll have the opportunity to discuss that as well. Yeah.
To share first about your vision on sustainability inclusion, and then we do the full round.
Sure, and I'll be brief. Thank you, Meg.
Listening to you.
No, I mean, of course, I could, if I bring the specificity of young people when we think about inclusivity, it's mainly of asking ourselves, are young people having enough opportunities to actually bring their life experiences that, although they may be short, they're very, very valid when we're discussing the world we have today, whether it's in terms of equity, and nowadays it's very common to be talking about the cost of living crisis and the housing market, for example. And at the same time, when we talk about the climate crisis, are young people being heard enough? Are they in the executive boards, taking decisions along the decision makers? And if not, why is not that happening? So I think it's really a matter of, and I think it touches upon exactly as you said, on the 3 E's. So we have equity, we have environmental and or environment and economics. And I think nowadays, when we talk about youth, is really there are different. I don't want to call it crisis, but let's say the perspective when we think of each of one of those E's feels a bit daunting sometimes, although I do think that when we're talking about inclusivity, it's also about bringing the solutions that different young people bring to the table. So a bit of this side of being non-conformer and solutionists that I think must be valued as well. So I'll leave it at there for now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Meg.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if this is working or not.
No, it doesn't sound like it
Probably
is,
not.
Meg.
Thank you.
There we go.
Oh, no, it's working now.
Okay.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. No, no, no.
It goes, yeah. Yeah.
Can you turn this off? I will just use this one. Yeah. Hi, everybody. This should work. Hi. My name is Meg, full name Margherita. I come from Italy. I live in Portugal for about 5 years now. I used to work for about 10 years in the impact and sustainability space up to the moment that I refer to as my breakup point with the sector, that I will expand on later. And today I mostly work in the in-betweens. On one side, I collaborate in the Amazon rainforest, specifically at the border between Peru and Brazil, on the Brazilian side, with a coalition of indigenous leaders on socioeconomic models and how else can we look at the current state of things there in the Amazon and therefore everywhere else, because much of the conversations of today depend on that specific part of the planet. And on this side of the world, I work primarily with investors, family offices, sometimes policymakers and founders, normally when things on paper should be working, but they don't. They don't because the powers that are on the table, being money, assets, a company, whatever, the leaders that are holding them have conflicts about it. And if you have conflicts about whatever form of power you have, or if we keep talking about power and privilege, saying that we should have had any, just because people before us might have abused them,
really cute.
then we cannot play this game.
I wanted to
Nobody
meet
can
you.
play with a tool that they don't like, or that they feel shameful
My name
about.
is Marga. Nice to meet
And
you. I'm gonna,
when it comes to sustainability and inclusion, I very much resonate with some of what my colleagues have already shared, because I actually have a conflict with a bit of both words. If I asked you to sustain something right now, if you have something in your hands, what would you do? What gesture comes to mind? Because the mind can play tricks, but the body doesn't have that perk. I don't know if we want to sustain this. I don't know if all the branches, decoration that we keep talking about in terms of ESG and indicators and reports and whatever is the type of work that feels sacred in these times. And so while I definitely connect with that intersection, I also know that when it comes to language and what language makes us do when we want to embody it, I don't think sustainability is the word. And in the same way, inclusion. Inclusion means that we're still thinking from structures that exclude people. And I don't want to play algebra. I never liked it, and I'm not going to start now. This is not an equation to solve, in my opinion, and I was humbled many times by the work with indigenous leaders when it comes to the lenses of what change-making and sustainability or inclusion actually looks like, and I'm happy to go for it later on. So thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to this conversation very much.
Thank you, Meg. Taiye, I could see you were just longing to jump in there, so please go ahead.
I was so happy to hear what Meg just said, and you as well. Posing the question is, are we holding something worth sustaining? And if we are excluding whom and why? I think a lot about sustainable development, but the word development itself has started to bother me a bit as I think about spaces, including the Amazon, that are regularly described as underdeveloped or undeveloped or developing. I've started to ask myself, in comparison to what? So if we look at the developed world with its, SUVs and its whirring air conditioners and its industrial agriculture, I see a landscape that is overdeveloped, against which the rest of the world is not underdeveloped or developing, but facing an opportunity to sustain something else or to evolve in a different direction. And I see where others see lack and justifiably exclusion, I ask myself, is the goal that we keep knocking at the door, begging to be included in something that is clearly not working? Or is there an opportunity to look at these so-called developing spaces and imagine a different future?
Well, that's given us all plenty to think about and entirely valid. I rather think we should chuck the title and and maybe delve a little bit more deeply into. But I mean, as we started at the beginning, just this use of language, we have to be so terribly careful about the words that we do use. I mean, I know certainly in the environmental space as well, and particularly amongst youth activists too, there's a lot of fighting talk. It's warlike verbiage that is used and thrust out there. And is that really the impression that we want to get? Now, Sofia, I know that in the work that you've done, you're looking at taking this sort of youth activism and making this transition to advocacy. And how well is that going? Are the youth feeling that they're in a place where they're able to pick up this mantle and carry it in the direction they want? And is that really leading them to making the changes that they would like to actually see?
Well, first, and just maybe tweaking a bit, I think it's not so much a transition, because we need both. You need both activism and advocacy. So because we talk a lot about the young activists and the movements they've been creating and the fact that they're angry, and rightly so. But then we forget that perhaps this activism, which is necessary, also comes from something that is lacking. And if we think about what is lacking, is often these opportunities to take the space and to be heard and to bring these stories. Sometimes it's as simple as storytelling, as we were talking previously today, their own stories. And if we think about this week, it was all over the news these past 2 weeks, the 6 young Portuguese people that brought 32 countries into a lawsuit before the European Court of Human Rights. They're bringing their stories, and this happened after the wildfires we had in 2017, actually in my region, that killed at the time at least 60 people. And they're not saying, here's what we know about climate change and here's what we would change in Article ABC. It's actually, listen to our stories. This is what we're bringing. And I actually think that a lot of these stories are coming from the so-called developing countries. I see a lot of young people who have this knowledge and life experiences, also the expertise, because often when we talk about young people, many of them are also graduates or have specific knowledge. We can even talk about indigenous knowledge. So it's not that they're lacking expertise in bringing just stories, they're bringing actually both. But it's really about bringing together the pressure and the disruption side, along with the opportunities to actually contribute in a very specific way. And when we talk about advocacy, it can really mean, being, so taking the seat at the table, participating, but also being able to influence the decisions that are being taken. And if we go back to the point on language, I really like this point in particular, because if we consider, so the past few years, there's been an effort to bring more young people representing their countries to the COPs. And we hear about the Conference of the Parties of UNFCCC, so United Nations, to talk about climate. And we bring these people there, and just trying to navigate within this system, you get bombarded with acronyms, which is, so all of a sudden we're talking about NBCs and NDCs and nature-based solutions and global stocktake, and how are we supposed to actually be able to navigate this system and the negotiations and understanding how everything works. So there's a lot of work being done so there are different barriers that young people have been and rightly so, and I think they've been very successful in doing that. But even the language barriers, it's there. And then we come to these conferences, and then main language is usually English. Are we assuming everybody speaks English?
Well, as I said before already, we've highlighted that in the Arabic language, if you say nature-based solutions, there simply doesn't exist that terminology for it. I'm going to throw a conspiracy theory out there for you. Do you think that the narrative is being controlled on purpose, perhaps by the oil and gas industry or politicians for whom the status quo is suiting them quite nicely? So by almost confusing people by using language that they don't understand, you force them perhaps to, or perhaps it's a way to control them. Or exclude, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, we have exclusion. I don't know if it's completely done on purpose. The thing is, and here we get back to the systematic, so the systems, the way the systems work, and staying with business as usual, and actually changing things. It's very hard. And then we go back to the question, if we think of activism versus advocacy, you know, if you could consider activism more of outside of the system, which young people are also doing. And sometimes we see these activists also getting into the door to take the formal, formal way,
stages,
the formal stages, and doing so within the system. And we need both. And I don't know which one is faster to get us there, but I think there is, for sure, and this we've been testifying, that there's a lot of things that are not working the way we have it now.
I think there's a beautiful African proverb, isn't there, about alone you can go far, but together we will go further.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Meg, I was going to come to you because you mentioned that your work with Indigenous peoples in Brazil and in Peru. How do they learn inclusivity? Is it something that they do learn, or is it just simply intrinsic within their communities? And can we learn from their approach?
Since we are all language nerds, one thing that I learned with Indigenous communities is that there is no othering that can be specific. And when we need to remember that when we talk about Indigenous people, we cannot just buckle them all together in a group. Is another culture, one that has seen, in certain cases, the tribes that actually have managed to protect themselves from our doing, the overdeveloping. They have managed to maintain a way of existing that we have forgotten about. And when we talk about inclusivity, as I said before, if a system has never been excluding, there is no such concept, is not needed. At the same time, doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries or a membrane to your community that is permeable enough for what it's life-giving to come in and is working on being better at defending itself with what is there to poison. Because as Taiye said, I love that you bring up the word overdeveloped, because back to the body, if we think about something that is overdeveloped in our body, it generally hurts. And when I think about the staggering contrast sometimes that I experience when I go there for a few weeks and then I come back and I'm asset managers class in the Polytechnic or whatever, the one thing that seems very clear for me amongst the many things that aren't, as I exist in this in between, is that behind some of the language of fighting and saving and shaming and guilting of our current lens of power, and behind the overdeveloped way in which we live in comparison to some indigenous communities, there is the same thing. It hurts. I don't think we can think about any system that is exclusive without talking about it. Because you exclude someone or something because you have been excluded yourself. Something at some point or someone at some point excluded you, so you are convinced that the way to do is strike back. But if you think about it, when you include someone, it's also because you were excluded. You know that that hurts, and you make the deliberate choice of not perpetuating that pain. And so when you ask me about my experience with indigenous leaders, that is most of the lessons that I receive is not about whether or not you have a power of like money or technology or knowing how to regenerate a tree with prayer. It doesn't matter which technology or power you have. How you use it and what for determines if you as a person are capable of embodying nature, and therefore your family, and therefore your community, and therefore the systems that you're going to develop in your tribe, in your city. Because science has been proving it already, right? Economy is a living organism, and it develops around, it's like architecture. It develops around what we consider valuable or sacred. And as you know, we were mentioning, we are a culture that because we might know 50 acronyms, but we wouldn't be able to define ancestry, for example, we might have lost how we can relate to several of our powers, including hurt, including what hurt, what makes us angry, and how nature experiences things. And there is many, many things that I believe can become medicine from the wounds if we develop the capacity to even talk about it. We are a culture that, as it was said, with language, with distractions, with pharmaceuticals, whatever, the incentives of not sitting down, not looking at, or not in any way relate to our pain are infinite. We believe it's shameful. We believe it's ugly. But until we change our relationship with that, there is no way we can turn it into medicine. Joanna here at the beginning of this event this morning talked about Cohen phrase, you know, the cracks are how the light gets in. It's also how the medicine gets out, if you're capable of changing your relationship with those cracks. So to loop it back to what you asked, I am beyond honor, because it's not something I planned on, to be very often exposed to leaders that don't have a language for comparison in their language, in their ancestral tradition. Therefore, inclusion is nowhere close to be even needed to be expressed. And I think, again, this is one of the things that we tend to forget about when we talk about climate change and regeneration. Oh, the forest. We're talking about the people of the forest, the ones that are proving to science of the best universities in the world that if you plant a tree in a way in one land and the same tree a few meters away, but with prayers of someone that knows the soul of that land, it will grow faster, be more productive, and regenerate the ecosystem in ways the first tree wouldn't do. And maybe we're tired of needing an explanation for this. Maybe instead of fast, we want effective. And maybe communities that we literally keep forgetting about when we talk about the forest or the ocean or our countries. Maybe someone managed, in spite of us, to have some of these principles for us to use. And when we talk about these topics, I think we have a lot to recover from those communities and with those communities.
That's really beautiful, Meg. Taiye, this is resonating with you.
It is. It very much so is. For a few reasons. Meg speaks about the body as a place where we can go to find a sort of more readily accessible truth. And when she was speaking about how anything overdeveloped in the body causes pain, it occurred to me that constant growth does too. And that one of the imperatives, moving faster in the direction of what is always my question, developing in the direction of what reality is something that plagues me. But the E for economy in sustainability might also have been a tricky one from the start. When you speak about inclusive, sustainable development, you're typically obliged to find a way to harmonize three things. So that would be social inclusion for which there is no need in the indigenous communities that Meg is describing, social inclusion, environmental protection, and economic growth. A question always arises for me, though, well, can we pursue economic growth, constant economic growth, and at the same time expect realistically to embark upon an agenda of environmental protection, much less social inclusion? Perhaps not. It's the only thing that grows nonstop in the body is cancer, which kills its host. And so I think that there is a lot to be gained from sort of reflecting on language. I do have a question, though, about something you've twice said, Amber, and it's whether anyone here speaks Arabic and could perhaps do you speak Arabic, Rami? Can you tell us a little bit more about how the words nature, solution, and based might appear in the language?
You got it? Okay. And this is the perfect moment to say as well, please, I'm coming to you, the audience, next for any other further questions for the ladies up here today. Sarah, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Rami. So I'm Lebanese, so originally I speak Arabic and other languages. That's not correct, what was said about the Arabic language, that there's no translation from nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions is a very simplified way of saying something. English is quite a simple language. The economists showed that it takes 88 weeks to start with Arabic, while it might take 22 weeks to learn English. So Arabic has so much more to offer than English. English is global because it's easy to speak and it's easy to learn. But nature-based solutions, the original English of it is solutions based on nature. And this is in Arabic, حلول مستندة على الطبيعة. So every word in English has so many other words in Arabic. For example, English has the word love. We have more than 20, 30 words of love. English has the word snow. In my village alone, we have more than 50 types of describing snow. So it's a very rich language. It's a language that started with the Phoenicians, and I come from the village that invented the alphabet, Jbeil, in the coast of Lebanon. And that language moved to Aramaic, and then all the Semitic languages, and then you had Arabic. So it's not correct, but it's nice to have opened it up. It's quite inclusive. Thing is that sometimes things are invented in a lab in the US or in another place, and you cannot directly transform this knowledge or this information into Arabic language. But it is a language that actually speaks to the soul. It's a language when Arabs were creating poetry, I mean, the world was in another place. So language is just a way of expressing your feelings. There's so much to it. I'm not an expert in language, but I just wanted to clear this up.
Well, I'm delighted that you did, and forgive me for being clumsy. And that's exactly why these conversations are so important, and audience, why we want to hear from you as well.
Can I add something super quickly?
Please
It's
go,
just
Meg.
when I heard that, and I wonder if this is true for traditions or cultures that might or might not be represented here. When I listened to you, what I thought is not that a translation wouldn't exist, but maybe if I think about some of the cultures that I'm exposed to, there is no concept for nature-based solutions because all solutions are, by definition, in the culture intended to be created with nature. So this idea that it needs to be specified, it might not be possibly expressed in a concept. And I don't know about Arabic, but this might be what the person that you were speaking with might be referring to. I don't know.
That was
in
what
some languages that might be the case.
That was how it was explained to me thereafter. So perhaps I cut my story off halfway through.
Maybe one day we'll solve this mystery amongst many others.
Absolutely. Now, are there any further questions, or indeed a question from the audience, or more comments? Because we love those too. Not at the moment.
The crowd needs more coffee.
Grab mine. Well, need more coffee.
Oh,
here we go.
Meg, would you share any...
microphone so everybody can hear you.
Would you please share from the indigenous leaders that you're so privileged to get to learn from any youth-specific leadership tools?
youth specific.
Yes.
So I
Or
can
how
only
they relate to like young people coming into leadership. Anything around that.
Okay. I'm not an anthropologist, and I want to highlight that my major exposure is to the tribe of the Ashaninkas, so not all the tribes, and in specific the Aldeia and the leadership of Ben Kipiako that I know you know about. What I learned with them, for example, is that in the Aldeia, where him and Moises Pianco, who also is particularly known in the environment, is that, for example, children do not get any exposure to Portuguese language before they are 7 years old. So in school, in the village, in the Aldeia, they do not have any exposure to language developed or from our world because it wires the brain differently. Because part of the practice and part of the weaving and tapestry of how an inner set of sensors, if you want, develop is through language, is through sense making. And so for the first 7 years in the Ashaninka culture, for example, they don't get any exposure to Portuguese, they don't study Portuguese. They might hear us sometimes in the Aldeia, but the Aldeia itself doesn't get much exposure to Nahuas, to white people. So that is one. Another principle that I was able to learn, not specifically from the Ashaninkas, I saw it embodied there, but I sometimes take courses, and sometimes there are also indigenous leaders there, is that when you look at people through the lenses of nature, Lakotas, for example, have this thing that they call elemental conscious. So they can look at a problem or a situation through water, or through a rock, or through a tree. And it has different lenses. And we took a course with River last year, and there was Tiokasin Goshors that taught us about that. When we do that with people, nature has very basic principles, which is everybody has something unique to express. You wouldn't be alive if you didn't have something to offer. Like in nature, nothing exists that is not meant to serve something else, not just yourself. There is no such thing as a separation between if a tree is just a function of a tree or to the garden. There is no such thing. And so when it comes to youth, something that is very important and shared is to see challenges as situations and opportunities for them to figure out what is theirs to express. So those that will show vocation or some form of lineage around medicine practice or leadership, you need to give, our Montessoris and Waldorfs also do that, right? Let the youth change their relationship with this is hard, but still meet it. So that invitation can provoke whatever is theirs to do, whatever is uniquely theirs to do. And then, so that's why the role of the leader is very much something that we are trying to pick up and bring in the board meetings, which is the caregiver, the gardener, the space holder, the one that, keeps your ground steady as you figure out what you're here to do, much different than these hierarchical leadership ideas that we have. But I can talk about this for a long time, and I'm sure that there is more things I am sure that I want to hear from these ladies, and maybe you do as well. So I will cut it here.
The tragedy is time always runs away with us, doesn't it? But I would just like to offer each of the three of you the opportunity just to close with a thought or a reflection for the audience to take away and perhaps use.
Will you start?
Yes, please.
We've heard less from you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And just out of curiosity, because of the Arabic thing that was brought up, I share also my life. So my significant other is also Arabic speaking, and he does tell this often that he doesn't find all the words that he needs, in this case in Portuguese, as he does in Arabic, and I find that beautiful. And that actually, and if I merge that with what we've been discussing here, so I lost my grandmother last year, and there was one thing that it really struck me at the time was that because she would use very specific words, not even of the region so she's from a rural area, but from the village itself. And all of a sudden I had this realization that with her, all this knowledge, the language, these specific words that if I say to my colleagues here in Lisbon, they won't understand, that got lost. And I think if we make the connection also with all the local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, as we were talking, the relationship with nature, and here I was speaking before about youth, but this is not a war between generations, so we need to merge those. And there's so much we've been learning with older generations, and we need to respect that. And it's quite funny that nowadays scientists are coming to the same conclusions that previous, yeah, exactly, that previous generations knew already, and knowledge, they couldn't put it in very nice scientific forms or formulas, but the knowledge was there. And I think it's important to bring this, and as Meg and Taiye were saying, so these are solutions, so this is important. And sometimes I'm worried about these things that we're losing because we're in such uniformed and standardized world.
Well, by talking about them now, you're continuing their energy for others to carry on. So we're not going to lose them.
Thank you for that,
Thank
Sofia.
you.
I've said a lot. I'm really delighted to be here, and most delighted to know that a huge percentage of the online audience is young people. You're closer to your age than mine. I often joke that we, on my continent, Africa, will not see the kind of change we desperately need and seek until our leaders were born after our independence, which is to say, were born into the world that they intend to reimagine. And it's just heartening to me to know that so many young people are taking this on with passion and with purpose. So thank you again, Sofia. It's just lovely to listen to you.
I can't choose between two things, so I'm going to share them both briefly. One, things don't change. They never do. We do change, and then we see things differently. And that's why I believe I originally studied fine arts. I believe that's the role of poetry and writers and beauty holder and witnesses, because things don't change, we do. And at some point we see through the work of someone or just the work of nature that something is sacred, and that is when we become unstoppable. But not the type of unstoppable that wants to eat up things, the kind of unstoppable like the mama bear, you know? This is sacred, I'm gonna protect it against anything. And the second thing you really made me think about, and I want to definitely sit down with it, which is the recovery of wisdom, something that also the tribes are trying to do. To recover the wisdom that it is in our DNA as it is in theirs. And when we hold a space that allows us to connect with it and go beyond the mind and beyond the fear and beyond everything, that wisdom generally wants to express itself. And because I don't believe things can change, but we can, and therefore things can change eventually, I wonder, what if we start asking ourselves, how can we go from the absolutely understandable rage and disappointment and sadness about what was done before our time to thinking that maybe our ancestors couldn't. They just couldn't. And just lay down. And maybe they couldn't express something because we can. We have 90% of our DNA that scientists call junk DNA, which I find it fascinating. Like, you call junk DNA the majority of the DNA, couldn't you just say that you don't know what that is? And so maybe we can call upon those that came before us, not from a place of like, why didn't you do it? But asking, and actually shifting from asking why me to me. This is all we have. This is all the territory that we have jurisdiction on. So thank you for triggering that. May we recover the wisdom of who came before us and put it to work.
Fantastic. Well, there you go. See, young people very evidently do have a role. And of course, we know that. And thank you to my three panelists so very much. We have learnt today that hurt people hurt people. We have learnt that we all need to dig deep and find our mama bear courage. And I also just wanted to end with something. John Marshall, who has an agency, the Potential Energy Coalition, they they did a study the other day. I think it was a pretty global study. It touched almost every country in the world. And the winning measure that caused people to unite behind climate emergency action. Any guesses as to what that might have been? I'll let you know. It was love. So, whether it's back to the Arabic language and the many words for love that they have, and indeed many other countries, and let's all find our different words and ways of expressing love and go forth from there, because then we will win in our fabulous climate battle that we are all here to address. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Very much
Thank you.
indeed. Taiye, Sofia, and Meg. Thanks, ladies.